All right. Let's start here. Okay, we'll have a few people make the trek. Greetings, how are you?
How are you?
Fine, I see you're wearing a Dallas Cowboys cap.
Yeah, I'm a big Dallas Cowboys fan.
Are you?
I am. Always support them.
They haven't won a Super Bowl during your lifetime, have they?
No, not since 1995. This year's going to change. 3-0. 3-0.
I hope so. They keep teasing us like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a Cowboys fan?
Yeah, and I've endured. I was there. All my life.
Are you excited about this season?
Well, they have a habit of getting to the playoffs and kind of like folding their tents.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope so.
Just the first half we need to work on. Other than that, we'll be okay.
I hope. Yeah.
Jack Prescott's doing pretty good right now. So.
Yeah. They put too much, I think. Well, the quarterback's an important position, but when they run the 3 Super Bowls when they had Aikman and those guys, they had a tremendous defense, and they had probably one of the best defenses that they said incredible. They had incredible defense.
I think we're a pretty good defense this year.
I hope so. I truly do.
Jeff Eaton's a good captain. We got Florence.
Yeah.
So.
Well.
Hopefully, and we got Chuck Fuller. And
Yeah.
Jake, so
Yeah.
solid.
Hopefully so. Well, go ahead and get us started here. Got a couple of things that are due this week. On Friday, the management decision problem number 5. And you can either do MDP 5.9 or 5.10, and they've got an interactive session that's due. And then you've got a couple of exams over Loudon Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. And I want to just take a few minutes or so and talk about what's in those chapters. So let me get logged in over here to Vital Source. And there we go. Yep. There we go. My apologies. I should have had this fired up and ready to go. Chapter 5 deals with the infrastructure for MIS, and that is the physical components that go into an information management system. And most companies have, if they've been around, they have layer upon layer upon layer of technology, and typically layer upon layer of infrastructure. Now, to its credit, I think this was when I first arrived here, OBU got hooked into a consortium of folks who were linking into the central United States trunk line for the internet, which is a high-speed trunk line where 5 gigabytes looks like it's in slow motion, and it's designed for folks to have access to it, to be able to compute faster, et cetera. Now, it's taken us some time to build our systems to the point where you really see some difference. But if you guys had been going to school here 10 years ago, wireless and all this would have been just completely out of the question. But so we've made some improvements. So that's one piece of it. And one of the things that you'll find when you go to work, you'll find old equipment, new equipment, some that nobody knows where it came from, and typically it's going to be machines and those types of devices internally, and then you're going to have service providers and applications and all of that layered upon things. Now, here over in figure 1-3, they show you the transformational process. And I've talked about in other courses where we take data and turn it into information, okay? And that takes infrastructure. It takes especially the ability to, it takes two things: storage capacity and computational speed. Without the two of them, you really can't, an MIS is really just exceptionally limited. So as you can see, they have the data that are flowing in there, and then that information that flows out in terms of the item number, the description, the units sold, to the year-to-date sales. So we've taken the data and converted it into something I can use, i.e. actionable data. Now, again, the authors walk us through this process of the system or a systems perspective in terms of infrastructure. And what's happened now is we see many interfaces with customers, interfaces with suppliers, the internal information system. And typically what you'll see is an internal information system will be in what we call an intranet. And that's what we all work from inside the company. OBU had, and I'm not sure if it's still, I don't think it's operating, we had a VPN, which is a virtual private network. And it was high speed because it had a limited number of users, i.e. faculty and staff. And it was also highly secure because it had encryption that was about as expensive as you could get. So when I was home, when I was at home, I'd use the VPN. When I'm here at school, I was logged in just automatically. But the VPN was a really nice feature, because at the house, if I was doing work at home, I could compute faster than I could if I used my ISP and my own machine. So again, when we talk about these infrastructure, the thing that's happened that's been the biggest change has been this, and it's been these interfaces with stakeholder groups, regulatory agencies, stockholders, customers. Customers typically like an e-commerce backdoor site or an e-commerce back office site that is designed. Say I have customers who come and order things from me. It's not like Amazon, where I go order something. We have a shared interface, and we have an ongoing purchasing relationship with them, so they can make a purchase or cut an order, and it automatically gives us an alert in terms of inventory and all that stuff. Suppliers, inbound, same story, okay? And then regulators who, particularly with financial institutions today, with the passage of after the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, the government imposed, especially on larger banks that they deemed quote unquote too big to fail, imposed the ability to go into their files, to go into their system and look at the system independent of reports that they were given. And that's continued to be the case, and now states have adopted that same approach. So if you're a state bank and you're regulated, say, by the state of Missouri, their exchange commission has the capacity to go in and look at your data, to look at your accounts, and not rely exclusively upon reports that you feed them. And I know, at least in that state, if you offer an IPO and you're housed in that state, the state of Missouri does have the right and exerts that authority to go in and check every single thing before your IPO can occur. And you're just going to see more and more of that as we want to get transparency with data. We want to make sure that not only transparency, but that we get accuracy and that type of thing. So this schematic here, the thing that's changed the most has been these interfaces with the environment. The things that haven't changed are these issues of processing, clarity, and arrangement and calculation, okay? Now, where it has changed has been the volume. the volume of transactions. When my wife and I bought our house 2 years ago, we sold our old house. When we bought our house, it was interesting because I used a traditional broker to do the deal, but just to see how things had progressed, I called the people at Rocket Loans, and they had a letter of credit for me within 25 minutes, a bona fide letter of credit. Yeah, he's good for this amount. And I showed it to my real estate agent. He was shocked. He was going, oh, I was going to take you to so-and-so bank. We ended up going to the bank because we got a little bit better deal, but it was mind-boggling. Then when we went through closing, our closing process was all electronic. We went to the title company to do the closing. I thought, okay, I'm going to sit down and get mounds of paper like it's always been. No, we opened up their portal and went in, put in the data, and started doing the closing documents. They print them out. We signed, boom. Some of them had, one piece of their portal had an electronic signature. So the ability to do these transactions at such a fast speed, that really is changing so much of what's happening with information systems. So this business of the infrastructure really boils down to trunk line capacities. It boils down to the capacities of machines. It's the physicality of this that's important, and that the authors hone in on us. Now, they give us those components of that, and ask us to talk about those. Let's take a look at those rules for a second. And here are the computer hardware components. And let me get over here, and I'm going to get the sanitation, get this junk off the screen. We've even added more junk. There we go. Okay. And they walk you through just the process of just through the business of owning a processor and what you do with it. And then the operating system platforms. These are between the user, okay, and the top level, the enterprise software applications. One of the reasons that this course is a tough course for almost everybody to teach is very simple. MIS now is really the realm of enterprise computing, enterprise software applications. This is at the macro level. Here at OBU, an enterprise computing, enterprise software application will be Banner. You guys can go into Banner and enroll in classes. You can look at, I guess you can look at your grades. I'm not sure what all, I've not ventured into the student view of Banner. On the faculty end, everything is there for me, including personal stuff like payroll stubs, W-2s, etc. So the growth of these systems has made MIS a far more complicated and complex course or subject matter than what it's been ever before. And frankly, unless you've worked at this level, it's awfully tough. I've not worked at that type of level. We had Miss Turnage who had worked for Walmart's World Center, and I'm telling you, that's the top of the mountain. And so she was just, it's a shame you didn't get to take the course with her. You took it with me instead. I can give you some of the end user perspective of this, but she really was able to and understood how this is all kind of developed, because their MIS is their life and death, that and their supply chain. Data management and storage, again, one of these key components that's changed. The first computer I ever worked on, business computer, was 15K, and we thought we were smoking. But 15K in memory, and we thought we were big shots. I think you might, I think you might have 15K in a document today. So that's been one. Another has been the networking and the telecommunication platforms. What's changed all of this piece or this component is the advent of mobile computing. At one time, before we had cell phones and cell phone towers, etc., everybody was hardwired into the system. You don't even remember this, but I bet if you ask your parents or your grandparents, they'll tell you about the times during the holidays when if you made a phone call home to talk to mom and say Merry Christmas, you would either do it at 4 in the morning or do it at 1:30 the next morning because the lines would be jammed because everything was hardwired. Then with the advent of cell phones, cell phone towers, and now you have mobile computing devices, and you have handheld devices, that further complicates the issues for a company in terms of its MIS. And one of the biggest issues they confront, I think you had a case where you discussed this, or maybe even this week, this idea of BYOD, bring your own device. I've even experienced it here when I've had students who are taking a course with me come to me with their phone and go, I don't understand what's going on in this spreadsheet. I'm sitting here going, probably because you can't see the spreadsheet. You only have a certain amount of screen space. It would be an idea to go to the lab or get a laptop or something so you can see what's going on. And so that's one of these pieces that's floating out there that's really changed and made this a very, very challenging environment. If you go into the OBU website, it looks a lot different on a phone, in my opinion, than it does on a laptop, than it does on a tablet. And it just, the functionality of it, for me, I don't even try to check my email via phone. I just don't do it because it's too jumbled. Okay, so the other is this issue of internet platforms, okay? And what they talk about there are web hosting services. Now, you probably know this, but just to remind you, the internet, okay, is the physical stuff that is the way that we transmit and display and access and change web pages. Or now, things like PDFs or spreadsheets. The web has, or videos, the web has changed to the ability to handle those. That's the World Wide Web. The internet is the physical stuff. And so understanding that's important, because if you get the two confused, then if you're dealing with problems and you're dealing with a problem at your company, you're not going to understand the problem is typically going to be your ISP. And there are big differences in them. And you can go over and find some sites where you can compare your download and upload speeds, or the speed of your provider versus other people. And good stuff you can find out at Google to see if you've got the fastest provider. And the problem is not the download. The problem is the upload. That's really where all this happens. And if you've followed if you've been following the news any at all, you've been hearing about this issue of net neutrality. Okay? Net neutrality means the internet is like a highway, and I can get on that highway no matter how many people are on there, no matter what time of day. Well, that can lead to some slowdowns. So there's legislation out there that's still kind of being worked through that allows companies to throttle some users so that they can't just overwhelm the system. And so these ISPs and the internet platforms, those are a key piece of all of this, and making sure that you've got the right ISP is absolutely totally important, especially if you're going to do things like VoIP, voice over internet, a voice phone system. We have a phone system here that's a virtual phone system. So we can take the phones out and return them to the vendor and put in another set of phones, and we still have the same extension numbers. We still have all the same functionality because it's based in the cloud. Just like when you come in and you do VMware, if you take a class with me where we're using it, we've gone to a cloud-based solution. It used to be at the start and end of every semester, they'd come in these labs and they'd change out the software and they'd have to sit here, and it was a mind-numbing, back-breaking experience for them. And finally, when the cloud cloud applications got inexpensive enough to use, we jumped that way. Again, these are things that end up in terms of the quality of work that you can get done, or your ability to handle different issues or to reach different markets, etc. Now, as I mentioned there, talk about the mobile digital platform, okay, and all of these types of software, these internet-based applications like Salesforce.com is one of them. ADP does payroll, and they've replaced many a payroll clerk or a payroll department. There are inventory services out there. There are all kinds of different business services that are called software on, they're like a software as a service, a SaaS kind of approach that you can do a business function. And people say, well, okay, if I can manage my inventory using this cloud-based system, why wouldn't I? So again, these components are important for you to have an understanding of. The enterprise, and I talked about that enterprise computing, okay? And the consulting and system integration systems, those are a little bit beyond what we could even really should be doing in this course, or thinking about that stuff that is beyond the scope of the course. But one thing that is important for you is this idea of IT and the BYOD. I talked about that, bring your own device, that kind of culture that's out here. We have right now, I have to put you through this thing of, you log in, you log into VMware. Like any classes where I do any kind of computational work or database work, they have to log into the machine, log into VMware, and then they have to come back and log into Canvas, and then they have to click on the link so they can see the screencast if they want to see the screencast. Now, that's a lot of work, but the way things are set up here now is if you don't use an Apple, you cannot project to these screens. Somebody made that decision. So somebody said, I guess, well, the people that use Dells, too bad. I had conversations with folks when I said to them, we have a course in data admin where we use Access. What? Yes. And I even had to have a conversation with some of the powers that be about, yeah, we do optimization and management science, so I need to have Excel solver on there, that add-in. And I had to fight a battle. So again, these are one of these issues that we run into. And one of the reasons I really have a struggle with this course is because it's just so much lecture. And I know you guys are not all into that because so much of it is just esoteric. And I'm looking to try, I wish I could find a good simulator or simulation for this. Virtualization, again, it's one of those, one of those areas in which in design, I'd say this, in engineering, they are probably the furthest ahead of anybody in terms of their applications of virtualization. There's software out there that, for example, if you're designing a plant or you're designing a retail outlet, you can literally recreate the environment. You're right there, and it's just like you're there. We're going to see more and more of that as people want to really get a feeling or a sense of what a layout would like, or even of a product. So it's not going to be too long before the virtualization will come to you and me. There will be a time, probably when you're my age, that the workforce will basically probably be working at home. We won't collect people in big buildings and have them drive 40 or 50 miles. People will be working maybe out in satellite centers or something of that nature, but you'll have a virtual presence and you'll be doing a lot of meetings. I got some pushback when I decided to use Zoom and to use this format. I got some serious pushback from people, and I just simply said, this is how our students are going to be working in the next 20 years. So let's get everybody used to this now and get used to being in a webinar environment and a virtual environment. Now, I'll walk you through some more things like the cloud service, and then here they give you a nice little schematic of Amazon's web services in terms of what they do. And I talked about software as a service, this SaaS approach. So these components, I mean, they just keep changing. And in terms of functions, business functions, that's where we see a lot of change with people like ADP, Salesforce.com, using the cloud like VMware. And as opposed to us getting a license with Microsoft. We use the license that's provided by VMware. Things like on-demand computing. I remember a day and time when if you needed to work on something at 1 o'clock in the morning, you couldn't because you were denied access. Access was from 8 in the morning. Our place where the access was 8 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, and then we shut down. Not the most productive environment today. I probably work around the clock. I get emails of all hours of the day and answer them, try to deal with them. And this is when we talk about this on-demand computing. It's the same thing here when I give you guys, give you folks assignments that are due on Friday at 5 p.m. typically. And I say, okay, get it turned in when you want. As long as you're at the deadline, you're good. That's on-demand computing. In the past, that just was not deemed kosher. So a lot of this is about trying to get workforces more engaged, to get customers and all these key stakeholders more engaged, and really literally just to speed up the enterprise and get it as fast as it can. The authors do a good job here in giving you these cloud computing models and the different approaches to them, and each of them have their advantages and their disadvantages. Okay, so you'd want to take a look at them and see why you might want to use them or not use them. The business about high-speed processors, I don't see any point in going through that. I think you conceptually understand that. And then some of these trends like Linux, open source software. Again, companies they'll try those products and then they end up usually going back to Microsoft Office Productivity Suite because it's a superior product. But those products are getting better. With time, hopefully they'll get up to a point where they're good. Now, what will happen, what a lot of providers do, folks that sell software, folks like SAS, SAP, Oracle, they will use a Linux-based system, but they'll mask it by making it act and look a lot like what you and I are used to. So there's a lot of icons, a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of choices, a lot of feedback, and a low level of crashability. This one area, I think, is one that I really want to emphasize with all of you, and it's this. I was struck when I started about 2 or 3 times a year. I'll go out to monster.com, primarily Monster, and any other sites that look for employees, and I'll look in the field of finance. I also, to kind of get a feeling of what's out there ahead, I also will do searches through things like the Chronicle of Higher Education, which has employment ads for professors. There's another site called highered.com, and you can go do a search for positions. And what's really struck me is when I look at finance, I see a lot of, you need to be able to do code. You need to be able to write code so you can write applications for your organization, or you can tailor a code to your organization. So I'm thinking at some point, now I've said it, our students need to learn code. They need to be able to write code that's applicable to their given industry. Now, as far as the data admin course, if you've taken it with me, we have exercises where we write and use structured query language. So we're in pretty good shape, but there's also non-SQL out there. There's also Hadoop and some other applications, but SQL remains one. But I can tell you this, when you go out to work, get ready to learn how to do some coding, because your employer's they're just going to ask it, and they're going to demand it because they want people. They don't want to have to hire a bunch of people to come in and tailor applications to their needs. They want you to be able to do it and handle it yourself. It's the same thing with marketing. I think we have some digital media classes here at the school. So if any marketing major, they'd be smart to be taking some of those courses, because I can tell you, I I don't know how many folks I had come to me over the past 6, 7 years who had applied for a job as a marketing position and were told, you don't know any coding, you don't know anything about digital marketing, you don't know anything about web design or advanced web design, we really can't use it. And I'd have the student come back to me and say that. Now, I hate to say that, but, and it's a healthy sign, and we get feedback from students who go, why aren't you teaching us this application or teaching that application? And I take that as a healthy sign, meaning that students are getting cued into the fact that your technical skills around writing code especially is important. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're teaching them code down in the grade school. If that doesn't make you feel old, it should, because they got kids in 3rd grade who are there writing code. Why? Well, that's where the world's headed. All of this around bring your own device, bring your own application, that type of issue. I guess this figure here, they try to give you a nice picture, a very practical example of this interface between their partner, Southwest Airlines, and this is Dollar Rent-A-Car. Okay, and an overview of a gigantic overview of the data flows that occur between those two entities as they try to link up their services and their complementary services. One obviously is an airline, the other is a car rental, and you can see how they've got these web services aligned to, and notice the data flows back and forth. And then they have, of course, for any future business partners. But these two are trying to work together so that if somebody books a flight, they can go and book a car and make it a more seamless experience than it tends to be. And you can see also the legacy reservation systems, the server, but this is just a nice overview or schematic of how that process all happens. Like I said before, one of the tough things about this course is that things in terms of MIS have advanced to that level. So this is really a course in my mind that's designed for CIS majors. And I think it's good that we have it, but I've been one of the people who's advocated saying, this may be too fast for folks who are typically going to be going out into entry-level positions. It's just, it's there, and you're probably not going to have input on decisions about it. And I don't know the extent to which the content will be of all that, of that tremendous help to you. So a nice schematic there, but it shows you the interface between them, those two companies, and how they use those. Now, this is just a nice chart that shows you software as a service, a SaaS kind of approach, then software that's outsourced, and then total spending on it. And you can see how it just continues to climb in terms of the source, in terms of software applications and the money that's being spent on it. Everybody understands that software is really the ultimate key to all of this, because that's where you procure, you transform if necessary, you analyze, you present, and you distribute information. And that's really what software is designed to do. It's designed to do that, whether it's Excel or it's Access or it's PowerPoint or it's Microsoft Word, or it's an application that helps you design entity relationship diagrams. There's one of those out there. It's really about taking this stuff and doing something with it so we can understand what we've got and make some decisions around it. That's why the money is being spent so much on it. and it's so much money is being spent on it, and it's being dumbed down and so that regular folks can use these pretty sophisticated tools. And I guess one of them would be, I think the thing that amazes me, for example, is if you look in Excel and you use the optimizer tool, if you've taken management science with me or intro to management science, and you see the textbook and you see the authors go through the process of doing linear algebra, and then you go in and you put the data into the optimizer, it's much clearer, it's much more understandable, and it gives you beautiful reports. And you ask yourself, okay, how did I do optimization without this software? And the answer is probably not as well as you could have if you had it. So these software applications just change everything. And like I said, with the two most powerful tools in terms of software are pivot table and the optimizer. The pivot table allows you to see data in multiple dimensions without having to use a database. The optimizer lets you literally say, okay, here's my goal. Here's the variables that need to change. Here are the constraints under which I operate. And boom, what do I get if I put this mix together? And you have the thing that makes it so powerful is that you can operate with what we call simplex LP, or on the far edge of that, or a nonlinear type of environment, things like marginal revenue that tend to track out in a curvilinear fashion, or evolutionary, where we're just not quite sure what the data distribution looks like. But we're going to see if we can find a feasible solution for it. So the other mashups and apps, things of that nature, again, these tools are just continuing to proliferate. You can see, for example, right now I'm using this Vital Source. I could have gone and got this. I could have gotten the textbook over at Kindle if I chose to do that. I like Vital Source because you can literally see the book. I can show you the book, and it changes everything, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of me being able to use the resources of the book and have them there so you can take a look at them. The figure 513 there, the authors do a pretty decent job of talking about how much money you should spend on IT infrastructure. And then they walk you through 6 factors to do that budgeting. What I've heard is a rule of thumb is that the average company should spend between 6 and 8% of its budget, its gross revenues, on information systems and IT. If it's a knowledge-based firm, if the product they sell is knowledge, it should be 12 to 16% of your gross revenue. Okay. And I think about where I work, and I retail knowledge. I tell my wife, I tell her all the time, she's laughs at me. I said, my dad was a retailer. I'm a retailer. I retail knowledge. Come take a course and I'll show you how it fits, just like I'm selling suits or cars or something else. Basically, what I'm selling here is insurance. Hopefully, we expose you to enough stuff that when you go out to work, you go, oh, I won't make that mistake. Or you can get employed because you've had the level of training that you need. So if you take a look at here, you could see, and they're kind of using this in that 5 forces model, where they impinge on the firm's services and infrastructure with each of these factors, and they're not going to all be equally weighted. It's going to depend. I would say this on the whole: the more money that's poured into somebody's head, typically the less sophisticated the information system they have to use. The less money poured into somebody's head, the more sophisticated the system has to be, because it has to take into account mistakes and lack of understanding, etc., on their part. I guess the consulting services, that business, I don't know. I want to pop over to chapter 6 for just a minute and talk about this idea of business intelligence, okay, and what that's all about. Now, the authors walk you through, okay, some of the general problems that we face in terms of trying to handle information, all right? And a lot of this is based on what they call the traditional file environment, where we can't get data in a, I guess you would call it, we can't get data in a critical mass such that we can look at it and get some insights. Business intelligence is designed to do that and to help us accomplish that. And you can see here how easily, and this is very typical, each of the functions in a company can get siloed. So you're looking at a piece of the puzzle. You're not looking at the whole. And so this whole idea of business intelligence is to make linkages between these subsystems that allow me to develop a dashboard culture. And that is a key performance indicator culture, and to say, what are the 5 things I need to know at my management level? What are the 5 things I need to know about my company? And when I've worked with folks, it drives them nuts because they're so used to getting reports that may or may not be of any true value to them, that to get them weaned off of those reports and to do the hard task of asking, what is it that we need to know? Not what is it that we would like to know or would be nice to have, but what are the key performance indicators? And most organizations, it's about 5 to 6 measures. But walking people through that process and getting them to understand that we've got to get to that point so you aren't overwhelmed with the amount of information there. So the first step in all of that is to break down those silos, and the second is to take that data and wrangle it and put it into a usable form, and into a form that tells me a story or points me to some question or to a conclusion. But this silo effect, this is a tough one to overcome, especially when it's multiple organizations within, say, a company. So this traditional process, it's just antithetical to the whole idea of business intelligence. But the key word on that is intelligence. The right data transformed into the right information at the right time in the right way. Stuff that I can see. Okay? Now, since I brought up the term, I'm going to do a quick search for dashboards, okay? And this is a nice little article on that Google provides you. They're wanting to sell you a service. Pop back up here. In fact, I've done the search. I'm just going to do the images. Let's just see. Now they are exactly, you say, gosh, it looks like a dashboard. That's why they call it that. Yes. The hard part is not producing this stuff. The hard part is getting the data that you need, transforming it, and deciding what data you need first of all, because you have to get folks to think data to information, but really to think backwards from information back to data. I've had an ongoing relationship and working with the church. And they have reports for everything. And because they're part of an association, they're part of the BGCL. The BGCL asks for reports, and so they generate all these reports. And I asked them, okay, you generate all these reports. Do you really read them? Well, yeah, okay. What's out there that you think you really need to know? Well, yeah, but then we're gonna have to. What do we do about these reports that we have to do? What I tell them is, send them their report, but you get tuned into some key things. If I was a church right now in Oklahoma City, I don't care if you were in Edmond, Norman, Yukon, or Choctaw, the first question I would ask is, how far does it take X amount of people to drive to my church? We know that church drive time, that up to about 15 minutes, at 18 minutes, it drops off the chart. People won't drive to your church. It will be the percentages drop dramatically. The second question I would ask is, how many unchurched people are here? And I can, and there are data out there, and you can run the percentages to figure out, okay, here are the number of unchurched people within a mile of me, 2 miles of me, 3 miles of me, but more importantly, 5 minutes near me, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. Now, the first time I ever sat down with a church and did a growth study with them and an analysis, you would have thought I was Lucifer. You would have thought I was Judas Iscariot. You would have thought I was some Philistine that came in. And I remember one gentleman, he exploded. He said, well, what's God have to do with any of this? I said, well, he's the one that invented a lot of the laws about how people operate. I said, that's what he's got to do with it. He programmed us, and we all tend to behave in certain ways. And I don't care what denomination it is or what church it is, there is a limit where people drive to see it. And there are also some parameters in terms of where you locate a church about how long it might be viable. Downtown churches, for example, are in trouble. Most downtown churches, especially in smaller towns, they're in deep trouble. Churches that are out off of interstates and are out in what we would call the exurbs, not the suburbs, but exurbs, are doing really well. You know why? Why would anybody venture a guess? Somebody tell me why they're doing so well. Easy to get to, and what else? Traffic, and that's wherever it is. Folks are moving to Edmond. So if you got Edmond's got about 4 or 5 really huge churches. The one that's amazing is the one out. If you go to Pops, which is 66, but there's that one that has the giant cross. You know the one I'm talking about? Has this gigantic cross. They look like they have a parking lot that'll handle 3,000 people, 4,000, 5,000. So working your way through that issue, so this chapter on business intelligence is really important, because getting folks focused on what do I need to know, and then walking them back to how do I get that information is what that whole process is about. Just collecting data is really of no use. It's of no use at all. And these are nice products, and these give you some nice illustrations, but if you don't know why you have what you have here. And so one of the things I've spoken with the powers that be is maybe ditching MIS for a business intelligence course. That's all we do. We work on that and walk people through the process of asking the right questions. What are the things I need to know? If I was a church, do you think I ought to know how many people attended Sunday services? The barometer of how things are going? Sure. How about the number of people that go to life groups or Sunday school? Would that be a barometer? And is there a relationship between the two of them? Do we have the same people coming to worship services as coming to Sunday school or coming to life groups? Okay. How far do they drive to see us? What's their religious affiliation? What's their lifestyle or segment, or do they fit a particular type of person? Anybody here ever heard of Charles Stanley? The guy that does In Touch, he's on television. He's a preacher down in Atlanta. Dr. Stanley's an interesting fellow. He's a tremendous preacher. And over the years, as I dial in and look, the people who are there sitting in the front row taking notes get older and older and older. And I think one day I'm going to dial in and they'll all have died and gone to heaven. And I guess they'll be playing tapes of Dr. Stanley. I don't know. But it's just nothing but old people. I look around where I go to church, same story. Old people, they're everywhere. And that's not the lifeblood. I have a limited amount of time, then I'm dead and gone. It's you people that they're after. Anybody here go to a life church or one of those brands, non-denominational? Anybody here is Southern Baptist? Okay, or you don't go to church anywhere? Uh-oh, boy. Well, I think I made my point as far as that goes in terms of the dashboards and all of that, of all of those kinds of things. And the authors over here in 6.2 talk about the database management system and a relational database. One of the reasons we have data admin in the curriculum, in the core curriculum, is pretty simple. Your ability to understand and work with a database in terms of an application that you'll have on your desktop will be important. More important will be your ability to understand what the people in IT are trying to help you do, and understanding how a relational database is designed to help me find unique instances, i.e. records, and collect a whole bunch of them, and then do something with all those records and look for insights, extract the data. That's the whole idea of the data warehouse concept and what we're trying to get done with it. And that's sad. You said, well, that sounds simple. Yes, but easier said than done. And all the problems attendant just of getting records that are complete, getting the right questions asked for forms, getting input devices that take data that you can use. And so, again, that system, the relational database system, is powerful because it allows me to collect and extract insights about transactions, about customers, about the regulatory environment, etc. All of that, it helps me see. And I'll tell you a quick story because I know we're getting up to 3 o'clock. This is where I learned the value of all of this. My first job, I taught at Southeast Missouri State University, which is in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, or Missouri, as my wife likes to say. I call it Missouri. She aggravates her. She says it's Missouri. Anyway, the university there the business school had what we called a small business development center. And we had a program with a plastics company there in town. And so the chemists who worked at the plastics company, they did polymers, would come over and teach, and our faculty in chemistry department would go there and work. It's a fantastic program because everybody figured out, we're not as smart or stupid as we think we are. But one of the things that was interesting was they had a lab where they did testing of polymers. They would do destructive and non-destructive testing for things like tensile, i.e. the strength of a polymer. So people who are going to use this material in a product knew if it would stand up to wear and tear, etc. Well, one of the things that one of the vice presidents for marketing started doing was he started collecting data for the residue polymers that were there. And so they do an experiment and they get a result and they'd have some residue material left. And he started having that analyzed and he started cataloging it. Well, it wasn't, I guess, maybe a couple of years later that the owner of the company called the president of the university, called Dr. Stacy, and said, can you send some of your faculty over with the dean of business? Because I have an offer. I have a company that wants to acquire me, and I want to figure out what I'm worth. Well, you know, we all go over there, and and again, this is in the early 80s, so people were really not thinking about intangible values. And so I did a search and said, well, you've got some patents, and we put a price tag on them. They had they didn't have any trademarks, their patents, and nothing really to write home about. And they had a plant and equipment. And we all kind of groused around and came up with a figure. And so we told the owner of the company, well, here's what we think they should offer you based on your assets, tangible and intangible. And he said, okay. Well, I guess it was maybe a week. And he called the president of the university and Dr. Stacy said, come back out. I want to talk to all your people to put those numbers together. And so we're all shaking in our boots thinking, oh my, I was untenured. I was a faculty member. I was untenured. And I thought, oh, this is the end. The guy said, they've offered me about 10 times what you guys thought we're worth. Where are they finding the value? As we started thinking about it, it occurred to us that what they wanted, that acquirer, they wanted that catalog. Why? Because they had created, at that little company there, they had created a database of these all practically brand new kinds of materials. That's when I learned how valuable this stuff is, the value of information resources. And sure enough, they got what they wanted in terms of, they got far more than they got the amount that was requested, far more than what they thought. And later on, the acquiring firm, there's a company up in St. Louis, acquired them. They said, yeah, we wanted your catalog because you've got some unique stuff in here. How did they know? Well, they'd had that company do testing for them. And some of those materials had shown up and they said, what's this? Well, could we use it? And they found that there were 2 or 3 of those residual materials. They'd get a report plus the samples that they could use in some products. And they acquired some new customers because they had customers saying, can you get me this material that has this tensile strength and this ability to withstand heat, etc. Well, let's try this. Sure enough, it worked. So it really taught me a whole lot about it. You'll have those experiences out there. And I always like to tell that story. And probably you've told to you 16 times, but it left an impression on me because I thought, wow, this stuff of cataloging and databases really does have some real value for us. Well, I appreciate you sitting here. See if anybody's got a question before I sign us off. Anybody have a question I could try to help you with? Okay. I will see all of you on Thursday, and we'll go from there. Thanks a lot. Thank you.